Hello, everybody. My name is Amiriad, and welcome to a new segment for our Eternal YouTube channel. This is going to be sort of a card review type thing, similar to our Eternal card breakdowns, but what we're going to be doing is we're going to be focusing on a single card. Effectively, it's going to be card of the day. I don't think it's going to be daily. The general idea here is I want to be able to talk about cards in a slightly slower context than trying to review 200 spoilers over the course of like a week, on the week generally that they come out, because it's nice to actually get those reviews out for, people who need them immediately. But I really like talking about cards, and I really like talking about card design. So I wanted to talk about like some individual cards. So we're going to be doing what I'm probably going to be calling card of the day, and we're going to use that as a way to fill out our regular release schedule so that we can put up more videos talking about more stuff and keep basically some cards and videos in the tank for days when I'm just like too busy to put out videos to keep a more regular schedule. So that's the basic idea. I'm actually really excited for this segment. I've been talking about and thinking about doing it for a while. And I decided for the first card, we should probably do what I called in set one the most powerful card in the game, Seek Power. So yeah, this is a one-cost neutral card that says draw a sigil of your choice from your deck. It's of course a slow spell, and it is from set one, the Empty Throne. It has also been basically a staple, and I think it's been in just about every expedition. It's certainly in the Unleashed expedition that we're going to be talking about it in. And it is just like in just about every setup. It's currently in the Expedition Vault for the year, and I don't think that's going to be changing anytime soon. So, Seek Power is a pretty simple card for a simple card that does a lot of things in terms of the general design and direction of Eternal as a whole. So, if you are playing Eternal, you'll notice as a central difference from Magic is that you have 75 card decks, and one of the things about those decks is that while your card pool is somewhat increased by that you also do need to include a decent amount of actual power seeking. Like a 25 power deck, the bare minimum amount is not typically enough to keep a reliable source of power going for any deck that wants to get above, like, say, 2 power. Even with the pretty intense mulligan system, like, you actually need cards like this to draw sigils for you, and that's why the card is actually something that you tend to value really highly in draft environments, as well as something that you tend to just run 4 of in any deck where you can, or at least run 4 of any of the many alternatives to this card that now exist. I'm talking about the favors, I'm talking about the new Hour relics in Unleashed, I'm talking about just any number of just 2-cost cards that draw sigils, play sigils, or increase your maximum power as a potential upside. Usually those are used in combination with Seek Power and other things like that. So, like, this is a good example of, like, one of those cards that has, like, interesting learning curve for people who are just starting out in card games. People might not value this card very highly at first. In fact, I think early on in like Eternal's cycle, this card was not actually like the most common thing to see. One of the things you'll notice if you ever look at the actual card pool is that you have all your cards in color order with the neutrals at the back. Seek Power is not at the back, it's at the front, because the Direwolf designers really want you to see this card and, like, actually use it. And it even gets added when you are adding power to your deck through the, like, auto balance system, where you're like, please add power. I think it used to do that. I'm not sure if it still does, but it's a card that frequently just gets put into your deck if you have the space for it. And, like, basically it is something where it is often your 29th powers, because the ability to both get the power consistently and also take power out of your deck so that you're less likely to draw into it on later turns when you no longer need power. This is a card that basically fixes both Flood and what we call screw, where you basically like don't get to draw a bunch of power, or you draw way too much of it and then you don't have enough gas of that kind of thing. And cards of this type of effect tend to really help with mitigating those particular factors, and they tend to like just make your power base more consistent. Now, of course, if you're playing a power base like this, you're choosing this type of power base for your design over something like Hearthstone system, where power just accumulates every turn. And like that is a good power system for any game that wants to be like pretty simple and accessible and have a lot of like, very fun like basic patterns. Like I think it is just something where people who are playing games like Hearthstone like tend to really like that system because it means that there aren't any non-games. It means that you don't get into situations where you just don't draw any power, or you just don't draw any like or you don't draw too much power, and then like there just isn't a situation where you spend 5 minutes doing nothing, which is something that can happen a small percentage of the time in Eternal. Something like I think it's less than 5%, but it is something that I think when it actually happens to you, you feel it, and there's a lot of like confirmation bias where it's like, man, it really feels like I'm having that happen to me a lot. So like that's something where this is a decision about power systems that like it goes into the very core aspects of how Eternal as a game is played. And like there's a lot of value to power systems of this type over systems like Hearthstone. The primary reason that Hearthstone's power system is so consistent, it's such a thing where it's just like you have 1 drops and 2 drops and 3 drops and 4 drops, and then like also you have a 30 card deck, so you're pretty likely to get the cards that actually play at those particular aspects. That what Hearthstone has to do to keep any sort of like longevity to its play experience is add a lot of randomness in other places. They basically have to put like a lot of cards that like actually just do damage to random units, or like a lot of like just sort of weird swings, and like it gets a little odd. And like basically a lot of that chaos gets put back into the system, which can make for some pretty interesting plays and highlights and stuff, and was I think a big part of Hearthstone's popularity very, very early on. I feel like the power systems for Magic and Eternal, while they have their flaws, are things that have added a lot to the longevity of this experience. And they're a reason why I played Hearthstone for maybe 500 hours, mostly doing the drafts and arenas, and a reason why I've played Eternal for something like 10,000, because power systems like this do add a lot of variability to the actual patterns of the game. Sometimes you're behind and you start to catch up and get to your big cards later. Sometimes you're ahead and you start to run out of steam, and then your opponent gets the chance to catch up. Sometimes, there's just like games where both of you are flooding or both of you are screwing, and you're both just sort of like trying to play with the limited amount of cards in your hand that you can actually play with. And like that kind of stuff really makes an interesting difference. Seek Power is a way to increase the consistency of the game that is just generally advised and proper for Eternal's experience. Like it's just something that you actually want to have in some form or another in order to actually get to a consistent place with power. But I think it's a really good card in that respect. I also think that like the ability to change your mana base to not include Seek Power if you want to run like more aggressive 2-drops, or include lots and lots of Seek Power so that you can play significantly more control heavy strategies, also really increases the variance and power level of decks that you can run in ways that other card games with more consistent repeated effects can't really attach to. And finding that flexibility is like an important part of basically increasing the longevity of your card game in general. I think this is why Legends of Runeterra has their like new mana system, where it's kind of like Hearthstone's, but it's got some more flex in that mana curve. So people moved away from this at first, but I think it is something where the complexity of it is not immediately understood, but people start to come back to it as time goes on. It's always important. The other thing that Seek Power really does is it establishes some core themes of Eternal as a card game. So Eternal is a Magic-like game. It's very similar to Magic in a lot of different ways. Its central differences in design are really related to its sort of digital-only design, where it is built from the ground up to be digital. It's not like Magic in that you can actually like do a lot of things with the permanence of cards, the modifications of cards, and things like that to sort of really play around with weird digital design. And I think Magic has something like this that's sort of tacked on to the current Magic project now. I think it's called Alchemy. But like Eternal is a digital like specific design. But it is still very much like Magic, and thematically there needs to be some differences, I think, in the overall style of it. As a world, it's a little bit smaller. It's definitely focused around a single city frequently and a single world, as opposed to many, many planes and many, many different spaces. We do some dimension hopping, but so far it's only been about 3 places. You have Zolta, your like 3 or 4 sets in Zolta. You have your many sets in Argenport, and then you have Bastion, the city of the future, and all of those sort of relate to each other and are tied into each other in a lot more like intricate ways. And one of the ways that they are very much tied into each other is a concern with politics in a somewhat Game of Thrones style feel, where there's a lot of factions that want very different things. How they go about it is very much a focus of like internal like political struggles, as well as like just personal beliefs and people like sort of clashing with each other in that respect, as opposed to sort of more like grand wars of magic. Like this is a story about a small family of people who are scions to a throne, and a few other folks who also have like, you know, positions of rulership, who are like in like sort of kingships and things like that. So Seek Power like specifically shows that like diplomatic map, the people shaking hands. It says basically like, oh, this is a game that actually includes a fair amount of fantasy politics, and that is a thing that I think is sold really well in Eternal's general theme and design. It's something that like worked really well in the first set, where it's concerned a lot with the crime and like streets of Argenport, the sort of like pseudo-fascist like Roland and his like taking control of the city, injustice, and just sort of like this interaction between all of the different factions as like actual different like factions of a world that go together in a way that is not always apparent, and can frequently ally in ways that also aren't always apparent. The end result of like all of this conflict is that all of the people who are fighting get together and form a government. And like this is the kind of thing that, you know, tends to lead to a little bit more of an adult story. I think it is a little more focused at like people of a slightly more mature age, somewhere like, you know, just generally like in their 30s to 40s. I think that helps a little bit. It's still obviously got all of the like ridiculous like magic and sorcery and cute yetis and like all of the different things that like, you know, sell a card game and sell a game and make the game exciting and fun. But like this sort of through line of minor politics that is shown in cards like these is important to talk about. And like I think it's kind of an interesting aspect of Eternal's like distinct themes from Magic, which I think sometimes Eternal can have a hard time getting away from Magic in identity, just due to the fact that, you know, it still uses a color wheel. A lot of the designers are old Magic designers. But like this is like one of those places where there's a very clear dividing line, and I think it actually like really comes through. Is this sort of like this bit where it's more like Game of Thrones. And, you know, Game of Thrones is not the comparison that I would always use. I think, like, that's just sort of shorthand for, like, anything with sort of, like, a fantasy political structure and, like, more, like, just a little more character-focused in that respect. And I think that that's, like, an interesting aspect of the game that definitely has some real-world impacts in the world. So, yeah. So, this is still a pretty strong neutral card. In standard expeditions, I think you should still play a decent number of copies of this if you're going for decks that want to play multiple colors. I think the prevalence of hybrid power and power that does something special has reduced the power of Seek Power significantly over the course of like some 11, 12 sets. Every time, since this only draws basic sigils, it is a little bit weaker now than it was due to the fact that oftentimes, in order to pay those really steep, deep influence costs that are now showing up more and more on certain cards to restrict their power level to particular colors, it's more important to run hybrid power cards because those cards generate 2 influence at a time, and that means that you can frequently hit different bombs at different levels a little bit faster. You can hit a 2-drop that has double red and then try to move to a 3-drop that has double yellow, and in order to do that, that's not something that Seek Power is particularly good at doing, so it's more important to run hybrid power in those circumstances, and it's more important to find ways to get that power from those cards, while maybe like boosting up with maximum power, things like that. But that isn't to say that this card isn't still, I think, your 29th card in every deck that you're starting out with. Anytime that you're just getting into Eternal, this should just be something that you're including 4 of automatically until such time as you have figured out what the good replacements are and why they're very good. I think it's still a very high pick in Limited, because if you are in a limited situation and you get a Seek Power, that actually just makes it more likely that one of your 3 losses is not going to be to Power Screw, and it makes it significantly more likely in such a way that you can like actually just have a better chance of getting your 7 wins by picking up 1 or 2 of these. And not only that, if you have plenty of these, then you can start playing like multiple colors, you can get into a lot more fun stuff, and generally have a better time with it. So power-wise, still the most powerful card in the game, but not actually as powerful as it used to be, and more of just one of many good options to seek power and find what it says, do what it says on the tin. That is one last thing I like about the design. It's always nice when a card has a name that is very evocative, but also just exactly what it says on the tin. It does the thing. It seeks the power, and then you get the power, and then you play the power, and so you just sort of become shorthand for what you're trying to do, which I think is a good little addition. Yeah, that is, I think, all I have to say for the moment on Seek Power. Honestly, like, this card is so important to Eternal as a whole, or like the to Eternal's start at the very least, that I think I might be able to talk about it more in depth if I wanted to come back to it at some point. But I think right now I'm actually pretty much, I think I've said what I wanted to say about it. So that's the end of our first card of the day. Let me know in the comments what cards you'd like to see next. We're going to have a buffer of a couple of these at a time, but I will definitely be adding some cards based on suggestions and what people want me to talk about, because I think that that should be like a lot of fun to do, and I'm interested to hear what people's favorite cards are and what cards people think are undersold or really like merit a lot more discussion. So yeah, that's it for now, and thank you so much for watching. We will see you all next time. I'm Myriad on Twitch, and you can follow me at Myriad Games on YouTube and Twitter, and subscribe. Have a good one, everyone. Thanks for watching.